Because even with all these taxes, even if it's 50% of something is still more than zero, you still need to make sure, unless this is part of a longer term strategy, which maybe you might be farther ahead as far as what your net result is, you still probably need to be charitably inclined to use these.
Welcome to the Healthy and Wealthy Retirement, where your certified retirement counselor, Mark Struthers, takes a holistic approach to retirement, going beyond finances and embracing holistic well-being. This YouTube channel will address not just the financial part of retirement, but also the social, the physical, and the emotional parts of retirement. Everything you need for healthier, a wealthier, and a happier retirement.
Before we go into our top 10 list, we'll dive a little bit deeper into all top 10 ways to help avoid that IRMAA surcharge. We should probably go over what it is a little bit. IRMAA is income-related monthly adjustment amount. It is a fee applied to your Medicare Part B, and D premiums when your income gets too high. The more you earn, the more you'll have to pay. I call it a tax. I think as we start to deal with debt and deficits, and entitlements are a big part of that, meaning Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, I think you're going to see some of these backdoor taxes. I think you're going to see, you can call it means testing or not, but I think you're going to see more and more of these. So for calculating this tax, it's done, as we mentioned, 2 years prior. So the IRMAA calculation for 2025 Medicare Part B and D will use 2023 taxes. And it's a modified adjusted gross income. There are different types of modified adjusted gross income. At times I'm amazed at the complexity of our tax system. And the way it's calculated you often see things like muni bonds, tax exempt muni bonds added back in. So quite often you're going to have things, especially if you're a higher earner and you're using muni bonds, you won't pay any taxes depending on the type and state of the muni bond. If you could use a national muni bond, which would have no federal tax, would have state of Minnesota, but you might not have taxes on it, but you might be subject. It would still increase that income, tax-free income, would increase your magi and would affect something like this. This is why tax planning and retirement gets to be so critical. It's because you have kind of all these hidden taxes, and that could affect, you could have an additional tax that you're not expecting. So, and you have to plan ahead. If you're planning on something for when you're 65, obviously you might have to do it 2 years earlier when you're 63. So this is where you really need to plan in advance, and it might take planning even 2 or 3 years before that to plan your income, your distributions, and everything else. So for your 2025 magi will affect your 2027 Medicare. Also, one challenging thing with these IRMAA taxes, it's a cliff method. So a lot of times things will be phased in and out or prorated, meaning you go $1 over, you don't pay the full freight. Here you do. They call it a cliff. You go $1 over, you pay the tax. And we're going to put up one of our cheat sheets that if you sign up for a newsletter, you can get free of charge. 2025, will I avoid the IRMAA surcharges on Medicare Part B and D? And you can see here, we'll flash this up here. For married filing jointly, it generally starts around $212,000 in income in magi. And then the monthly surcharge ranges anywhere, if you add in the Part B and D, you can see here $87 to all the way up to well over $500 per month. So a lot of times folks in these higher incomes, it might not affect you too much, but you need to be aware and factor this in. Is this going to dramatically affect your planning? Maybe, maybe not. But if you add this in with maybe some other taxes, it could affect your longevity risk. It could affect you leaving your goals. And many times it just takes a little bit of planning to avoid some of these high fees altogether. Before we start going into deeper in our top 10 list, one thing to keep in mind is Say you had a high income year, but your circumstances change 2 years later, you can appeal it. The Social Security Administration allows you to appeal based on a life-changing event, which include marriage, divorce, death of a spouse, work stoppage or reduction in retirement, loss of income, producing property, loss of employer supplemental payment. So we'll have the list in one of our newsletters, but just be aware that there is something you can do if for some reason you have a high income year, but that's not truly reflective of where you're at. And quite often that could happen to folks, and their ability to pay that $100, $200 a month, for some that's not a small, for some that is a small bill, but for others it can be pretty dramatic, especially if that high income year was an anomaly. So here is, we'll go through our top 10 list in kind of a fun David Letterman style way, as fun as you can make taxes in retirement. And then we'll go into each in more detail to help you save on taxes in retirement. Here it is, the top 10 ways to dodge the IRMAA surcharge and save money on taxes on Medicare in retirement. Number 10, maximize tax-deductible retirement contributions. Number 9, prioritize tax-free retirement income sources. Number 8, make qualified charitable distributions or QCDs. Number 7, utilize a donor-advised fund. Number 6, implement tax gain harvesting, often overlooked. Number 5, leverage your HSAs, your health savings accounts, and to a lesser degree, medical savings accounts. Number 4, implement tax loss harvesting. This one is very overlooked for those with large taxable accounts. Number 3, optimize your investments and accounts in your investments and investment locations for tax efficiency. Number 2, implement tax efficient withdrawal strategies. Take some planning. That's why we're here. And the number 1 way you can avoid the IRMAA surcharge in retirement is strategically utilize Roth conversions. All right. And here's the late night music. So let's get on to our top 10 list. Number 10, and the order of these isn't exactly perfect. I spent too much time probably debating. These are all good tips, but some are more valuable than others. Number 10, we had maximize tax deductible retirement contributions. So even if you're still working part-time in retirement or have earned income, making these tax-deductible contributions can help. It can help you in those future IRMAA brackets. So traditional IRAs, solo 401ks, simple IRAs, SEP IRAs, those are less common. That's why that one was number 10. Number 9, prioritize tax-free retirement income sources. So you can think about making sure and we talk about Roths later on. Roth is a great option. That the distributions from the Roth does not count as income for this Magi. Other ones that often come up, reverse mortgage proceeds. That is it's not heavily used, and it like anything, you're making an informed decision. For some folks, it is a good option. Those are often oversold. But that being said, things like reverse mortgage proceeds might be an option for an income source to use the equity in your home. Permanent life insurance, cash value loans, withdrawals. Again, these are lesser used, but part of making good decisions are exploring all options. So trying to plan ahead for your tax-free retirement income if you're trying to keep your taxes down, specifically avoid this IRMAA surcharge. Number 8, make qualified charitable distributions or QCDs. A qualified charitable distribution is a direct donation from your traditional IRA to your qualified nonprofit organization. If you are in for RMD age, or actually 70 and a half or older, actually. The QCDs are not taxed as income, so you can have your RMD up to $105,000, and it can satisfy some or all of your requirement distributions. RMDs are a big culprit for folks that occur the IRMAA surcharge. This is one of the good ways of avoiding it, especially if you're charitably inclined. When it comes to some of these, you still need to be charitably inclined to make this of value to you, because even with all these taxes, even if it's 50% of something is still more than the zero, you still need to make sure, unless this is part of a longer term strategy, which maybe you might be farther ahead as far as what your net result is, you still probably need to be charitably inclined to use these. Number 7, use a donor advised fund. These were always a really good tool for actually more of a control reason. These became popular when the standard deduction got really high. It was a way of folks who couldn't, because most folks could not itemize enough, especially with the SALT cap. Won't get into what that is, but just know that, especially if you're a higher earner, this was a way of getting more than the standard deduction. You would often clump donations to get more tax deduction for your buck. Take it all in 1 year or fewer years, and then the donor advised fund allows you to give to your charities. You create your own little charity, which is pretty cool. And also you can help, and you can be anonymous. You can name your charity what you want. But this was a way of having more tax benefit by bunching several years of donations, and you could give it out to multiple charities. It also is valuable if you're not sure where you want to go, where you want to give, where you don't want to necessarily give too much to one charity. Maybe they change their mission or something. This gives you some flexibility. You could skip some years. You could have these funds grow for 10 years and then give even more. So donor advised funds, again, you need to be charitably inclined, can be a real great way of doing it. Also, avoiding capital gains. So donating appreciated securities can be a big one too. So not only do you get that, maybe get a larger tax deduction, you avoid the capital gains tax. And if you're someone that has a lot of assets, a lot of income, you could get up into that total of 23.8% capital gains tax. So donor advised funds are a really good tool, and they're a lot simpler than some other charity giving options. So it really can be a great thing. Number 6, implement tax gain harvesting. This one's overlooked. I'm not sure if it deserves to be number 6. It was a tough call. Those donor advised funds are pretty valuable. But a lot of times folks will have capital gains, and they'll want to take some money out, or maybe they want to diversify, they want to change their investments. A lot of times they'll have years where they have where their income tax is very low. We often call it Roth, sometimes gap years, or Roth. I call them Roth conversion valleys, where income is lower, usually somewhere between the age of 60 and 70. And we're going to talk about Roth conversions coming up here. But a lot of times, harvesting capital gains where you could even have a 0% rate is valuable. Again, it just takes some planning. You need to be on top of this stuff, but it's tough to beat zero. In some cases, maybe it's even tough to beat 15%. So making sure that you are taking advantage of the tax brackets. It's tough to beat 0%, and also it's just tough not to have some tax. And quite often you're better off proactively paying a little bit of tax now than paying a lot more tax later. Number 5, leverage your health savings accounts. As we've talked about, the health savings account is probably the best account out there, triple or even quadruple tax advantaged. And obviously in retirement, for qualified medical expenses, it comes out tax-free. You could invest your HSAs in risky assets, which means you could get more growth. If you need to access it, obviously be careful of how you invest. But this can be a pretty wonderful way of having tax-free withdrawals. Maybe you don't want to harvest capital gains to pay for medical expenses, or if you don't want to take a distribution from your IRA. So this is a way of making sure that you're not that one, you get the tax deduction when you make the contribution. Two, that you can also you can limit your tax liability in retirement. HSAs are really a wonderful account. The related to that, and we lump these together. I'm not sure they should be. Medical savings accounts aren't used quite as much. This is a way with high deductible Medicare Part C plans, Medicare Advantage plans. Funds contributed to Medicare by Medicare to the MSAs are tax-free, and withdrawals remain tax-free if used for qualified medical expenses. And where they are a little bit like HSAs, any unused funds can be rolled over to next year. Similar to health savings accounts. These tax-free funds can help with out-of-pocket medical expenses, so these could help you with taxes in retirement. So making the most of your HSAs and MSAs, taking advantage of some of the accounts that are available to you are great ways of trying to keep your tax rate down and manageable and avoid that IRMAA surcharge. Number 4, tax loss harvesting, and this one might be a little too high. Those of you that have large taxable accounts, it can be valuable to implement a tax loss harvesting strategy, even where you maybe have a separately managed accounts, often called SMA accounts, to where you're proactively trying to harvest small little losses that build up over time. You can hold on and bank these losses for years and years, to where if you do need it, you do need to sell something and realize a capital gain, and you can offset a tiny bit, a little bit of your income as well. Having some kind of tax loss harvesting strategy could be really valuable, and it could save you money on taxes and keep you from having to pay that IRMAA surcharge. Number 3, optimize for tax efficient investing. This one is a big one. 3 is probably where it belongs, maybe even higher. It's your choice of investments. So if you, assuming you don't have a tax loss harvesting strategy, using securities that have a very low tax profile, often mean smaller dividends or smaller capital gain, smaller or no capital gain distributions. So the choice of those investments, some ETFs are managed or just naturally have very low tax profiles. I mean, they don't have a lot of distributions, they don't have high dividends. And think about things like real estate often have very high dividends. Think about things like value funds, or a lot of international funds have higher dividends, or just a dividend strategy. If you have things that have high dividends, which can be a good thing, can be valuable, it might be worth having them in a taxable account. But maybe you want those in your tax-free or tax-deferred accounts, meaning your traditional IRAs, your Roth IRAs. So choice of investments that are tax-friendly. Also, tax location. Tax location is huge, especially when you're talking over decades. This could be pretty powerful. Simply, you could have the same portfolio, but just put things where they're more tax advantaged. Again, realizing what performance might look like from account to account and what that might look like over longer time periods. But choice of investments and also tax location can be a great way of keeping your tax rate down and avoiding that IRMAA surcharge. Number 2, implement tax efficient withdrawal strategies. So this is where you would look at what accounts you have. This would be look at, do you take from a taxable account first? What income years are naturally lower? When do RMDs start? When does Social Security start? And do you take from when do you take from the Roth? When do you take from the IRA? And so coordinating these things and making sure that you're paying less tax over your whole retirement, not just next year. It's individual choice. There are some folks who say, you know what, I am going to push on that balloon. I'm just going to avoid taxes as long as possible. If my tax balloon bursts when I get to be 85, so be it. It's about making an informed choice. But having a tax efficient withdrawal strategy is crucial. And that brings us to our number 1 top 10 ways to dodge the IRMAA surcharge and save on Medicare and retirement is strategically utilize Roth conversions. As I mentioned, most people have years from the point where they retire or semi-retire, their income drops. They don't have wages filling up the standard or itemized deductions or filling up the lower tax brackets. And when their income for sure will most likely start higher, usually right around 70 if you're pushing off Social Security as long as you can, or maybe in your late 60s, whenever you're going to start Social Security, and also RMDs. So RMDs have been pushed out well into the 70s, but you could call those, I call them Roth conversion valley years, where the income is lower, and the tax brackets are use them or lose them. So you're quite often better up filling up those tax brackets when your income's lower, paying a little bit of tax now to avoid more tax later in retirement, not just the ordinary income and state taxes, but also things like this IRMAA surcharge. So if you proactively do some of these Roth conversions in a smart way, and because you have to do it 2 years in advance, you can try to avoid a much higher tax bill. And when you actually step back and look at we do this with clients all the time, what you can avoid by doing these Roth conversions, the taxes you could save, it's pretty substantial. It's pretty convincing. It's not for everyone. You have to be real comfortable purposely, most likely paying more tax now than you have to, with the idea that you're going to save on taxes later in retirement. But make an informed choice. And I will tell you that when folks start looking at what RMDs do to their tax rate later in retirement, and they look at things like this IRMAA surcharge, they often will say, you know what, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to start filling up some of those lower tax brackets. And just be aware, even when you do these Roth conversions, that you're aware of what some of the unintended consequences are. As again, some folks, they might be better off longer term, substantially better off doing Roth conversions during the Roth conversion years, the low income years. But sometimes they'll lose on things unexpected, like their property tax rebate or something like that. And it's about making sure you're aware of that and you're not surprised. Because if you put some thought into planning around all the taxes in retirement, you can have a healthier, a wealthier, and a happier retirement. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Hope you enjoyed our top 10 list. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends. Share the love. Make sure they have a healthier, a wealthier, and a happier retirement as well. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter for free resources and check out our website and social media pages for exclusive content and updates. See you next time.
Sona Financial, LLC, DBA Sona Wealth and Sona Wealth Advisors, is a registered investment advisor with the state of Minnesota. All views, expressions, and opinions included in this communication are subject to change. This communication is not intended as an offer or solicitation to buy, hold, or sell any financial instrument or investment advisory services. Any information provided has been obtained from sources considered reliable, but we do not guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any description of securities, markets, or developments mentioned.